Krishna tells in Gita, Ye yatamam prapadyante tamstataiva pajamyam. According to how one surrenders to me, I reveal myself accordingly. Indra had attachments. Dhyayato vishayam pungsang sangasteshu bhajayate. And when desires and attachments are unfulfilled, one becomes angry. And Krishna explains the whole system of how the evolution of desire in this world. First there's a desire to enjoy something. Then there's attachment. And when attachment's unfulfilled, there's anger. And when there's anger, then memory is lost. That's what happened to Indra. He forgot that this is my beloved Lord. This is where I get all my power from. And when the memory is lost, one loses one's intelligence and one does things that are out of one's character. So all the demigods, everyone was watching as Indra's retaliating. And little 7-year-old Krishna, he's approached by the Brijbasis. Look, the cows and the calves, they're being afflicted by the rains of Indra, and you told us to do this Govardhan Puja. So please help all of us. And Krishna smiled. He didn't even look angry. He just said, please come. And he lifted Govardhan Hill, and he held it up with a little finger for 7 days and 7 nights. And Indra, with all of his powers, was showering rains and thunder and lightning. And Krishna's so thorough, so complete when he wants to humble a devotee. Indra sent the most powerful winds of creation, and he could not move a single particle of dust, could not separate a single leaf from the hundreds of millions of leaves on the trees of Govardhan. And everyone was happy. Under the hill, for 7 days and 7 nights, the Brijavasis were having a jubilant festival with Krishna, smiling, laughing, singing. And what could Indra do? He became sober and came and surrendered his heart to Krishna. And then Lord Brahma, who's the father of Indra, when he took away the little calves and the gopas, he was thinking, I will show my prowess. Who is this Krishna? Even he became bewildered. After Akasura was liberated, the demigods were just amazed that Krishna could do this. Can you imagine this gigantic serpent? And limitless little cowherd boys and calves danced in his mouth and went right into his stomach. And he closed it after Krishna went in. And then Krishna expanded himself and liberated Akasura. Actually, he suffocated him. And by his glance, he brought all of his friends and all of his calves back to consciousness, and then they all came out. And all the devatas saw the light of the soul of Akasura enter into Krishna's body, which means he was going to be an eternal associate of the supreme truth in the spiritual world. This was just amazing. Even Brahma wanted to see, how is this possible? Who is this Krishna? And he sees Krishna sitting on the bank of Yamuna with all these little cowherd boys, and they're all eating prasad. And they were hungry because after this whole Agasura pastime, it was quite exciting. So they were relishing each other's food. Krishna would say, this is what my mother gave. And somebody else would say, this is what my mother gave. And one of the little gopas took a bite out of it and said, Krishna, this is so delicious, you should try it. And he took it out of his mouth and gave it to Krishna, and Krishna ate it and said, oh, this is very good. And the demigods and Brahma, this is God. He's eating the prasad, he's eating the food that's coming out of the mouths of these little cowherd boys. Very small children. And Krishna was a very small child. So Brahma wanted to see. He wanted to show his powers and wanted to understand, what is this little boy? So he took the calves and took the cowherd boys, and Krishna manifested himself as every single one of them, so that no mother cow, no mother or father gopa gopi, none of them could detect that this was not their child. So thorough. Every single particle of their clothing, the way they talked, the way they moved, every hair on their heads was identical to the original child. The calves. The only difference is all the cows and all the bulls and all the gopas and gopis, they never loved their children so much. Krishna's Rasa Vihari. He understood that all the gopas, all the gopis, all the cows, they loved Krishna more than they loved their lives, more than they loved their own children, more than they loved anything. But there was no envy. They were all so happy for Yashoda and Nanda. They would celebrate day and night the good fortune of Yashoda and Nanda. They never thought, why not me? But because there was no envy in their hearts, and because all these different Brijabasis were so happy for Nanda and Yashoda, Krishna gave them the same fortune. And he became their very child for 1 year. And when Brahma came back a year later, which was just a minute by his calculations, he saw everything was the same. All the little children are doing the same thing. They're just going out with Krishna, and all the calves are happily dancing around, and Krishna's playing his flute, and what's happened here? I've put them all to sleep and hid them. He went and he saw that they were all sleeping and hidden. And he came back and he saw they were all there playing. He was bewildered. He was trying to rationally, philosophically, logically, mathematically figure out, how is this possible? They're here and they're there. And even more than that, with all my powers, I could not even cause the slightest disturbance. And he became so bewildered, he practically lost consciousness. But Krishna wanted to make it complete. So suddenly every calf and every gopa became Narayan. There were millions of Narayans standing around smiling. And then Brahma was really bewildered. But Krishna wanted to take it even farther. When he was just about to black out because he just couldn't understand what is happening, how is this happening? Then everything disappeared and there was only Krishna standing, this little boy, holding some dahi with fruit. And a year later, it was still just as fresh as it was. And then Brahma realized. Then he became blessed. He fell unconscious. He stood up. He saw Krishna again. And he realized he was insignificant. As long as he thought in any way that he was great, he could not recognize what is Vrindavan. But when he understood how great is Krishna and how sweet is Krishna, it's like the entire 10 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam manifested their essential truth in a moment to Brahma. He realized Krishna is the source of all incarnations. He's the source of all my powers. He's the source of all everyone's powers. He's the source of all the demigods. He's the source of everything. And yet, he's looking like he's confused, trying to find his friends. And he's just a little boy, and he's so innocent. He won Brahma's love. Brahma surrendered to him. And at that point, Brahma could see Vrindavan. He could see every tree as a Kalpavriksha tree. That the Yamuna River was pure spiritual nectar. That every particle of dust was Chintamani, more valuable than the most precious jewels of Vaikuntha. And that all the inhabitants of Vrindavan and all of their forms were the most blessed, fortunate, liberated beings because they all had love for Krishna. And the most amazing thing, they were the most fortunate, liberated, highly spiritual, advanced beings in all material and spiritual worlds. They had the highest, deepest realization of God, of anyone, and yet none of them even know that Krishna's God. This is what Brahma saw. Lord Varahadev was born from Brahma's nose, so he knows what avatars are and how powerful they are. When he does puja, Lord Narayan comes down to accept his worship. He's a very self-realized person. But here are people who are more highly spiritual advanced than any others in any spiritual world, and yet they don't even know he's God. They just love him so intimately, so sweetly, unconditionally. Krishna's sweetness, Krishna's beauty, Krishna's love is his special feature. And Brahma, in his beautiful prayer to Krishna, he compares a firefly. You know those little fireflies? At night, they give light. They go teet, and light goes off. And then it goes off. Then they go teet, and light goes off, and it goes out. It's very beautiful, especially when there's many of them. Brahma said, a firefly, when in the darkness of the night, when it releases the light, because the firefly has very little eyes, can't see the whole sky. We take for granted the relative position of everyone. When we're walking down the street, what we see. Well, just think about it, what an ant sees when it's crawling down the street. Now the spirit soul in the ant is a conscious living being trying to stay out of danger, avoid pain, and enjoy pleasure. But when an ant is looking up, can't see the stars in the sky like we do. So the firefly with its little tiny eyes, little tiny brain, gives off light and thinks, I am lighting up the whole sky because everything around him is illuminated. Doesn't realize when we see it's just a little light in one little place. He's thinking, I'm lighting up everything. So can only feel. But when the sun is out, when it's really dark out. But when the sun is out at noon, the firefly, again and again, realizes it's insignificant compared to the sun and the energy of the sun. So similarly in darkness, we think we're very great. But in the presence of Krishna, then we find the greatest happiness in Krishna's greatness. This is how Brahma surrendered. And we find in Krishna's Leela, Varuna, how he surrenders to Krishna after seeing his glories. And Lord Shiva, as Gopeshwar Mahadev, he becomes a gopi because he wants to be the servant of the gopis to please Krishna. And that's actually the highest, most complete revelation of Shiva, Gopeshwar Mahadev. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Today, Janmashtami. It's very wonderful how Krishna appears at midnight, because it's the darkest time of the day. Ramchandra appeared at the lightest time of the day, at noon. And Srimati Radharani appears at the lightest time of day, at noon. In most incarnations we find, because they're giving light in the darkness of this world. But Krishna is born not only at midnight, the darkest time of the day, the time that most devotees are sleeping. You know, midnight is like noon for Ravana. It's like the time of awakening. Nashato, the Bhagavad Gita tells what's night for a devotee is day for someone who's attached to material enjoyments. Oh, Krishna appears at midnight in a prison cell. The darkest time of the day, in a place of bondage. And his purpose, to give total freedom and light. So the contrast of Krishna's appearance to the circumstances around him very much reveal Krishna's purpose in this world. He comes to dispel the darkness of forgetfulness and release us from the prison of our forgetfulness. When Krishna was born in Mathura on this day at midnight, he revealed the form of Vishnu to Devaki and Vasudeva. It was a special time. Mathura was the capital of the Yadu dynasties. It's the eternal spiritual world of the Lord. But Kamsa, he was so arrogant, so hungry for power and control. And when you have such material attachments, you succumb to fear of losing it. In such a fearful state, he was going to kill his own sister on the day of her marriage. When he heard that voice, that her 8th child will be the cause of her death. He put Vasudeva and his cousin sister Devaki in prison, put them in iron shackles. They were chained to the walls. They had no freedom, year after year. And it was in that circumstance they maintained their love and their devotion. And it was Krishna's will. It was Krishna's will that he take birth from them, so they kept having children to facilitate Krishna's desire. So when Krishna appeared to Vasudeva and Devaki in his beautiful form of Narayan, they understood he's God. But still, as a mother, Devaki was afraid. If Kamsa sees you in this form, he will know that Vishnu actually has appeared. And he might harm you. So please hide this form and become like a little ordinary baby so that we can hide you. This is her motherly love. And Krishna, to reciprocate with his devotees' love, from the form of Narayan holding the conch shell and the Sudarshan chakra and the club and the lotus flower, he became a beautiful little tiny baby. And simultaneously he took birth to Nanda and Yashoda. And Krishna, according to his will, Vasudeva picked up this little baby and put him in a little box and put him on his head to take him to Gokul Mahavan, to replace him with the little daughter that was born as the younger sister of Krishna to Yashoda and Nanda. Suddenly, in the darkness of the prison, everything was illuminated. For Vasudeva and Devaki, everyone else in all of Mathura fell asleep. This Yoga Nidra. Yoga Maya was given this instruction by Krishna to make all the arrangements. And everyone was so deeply sleeping, nothing could wake them. The prison, all the different walls and the doors through the opened. And the chains, just without anybody's efforts, just opened up. So Vasudeva just walked out with little Krishna. Nothing could stop him. And there was massive rains. Vasudeva was looking around and he was seeing torrents of rain pouring down everywhere, but not a drop was coming on him or his little baby. He couldn't see what was happening, but behind him, Anantashesha was like an umbrella blocking, so not a drop could touch them. And when they came to the Yamuna River, it was very wide, it was massively flooding, it was swirling. And Vasudeva went to cross it, willing to take any risk. And Yamuna became just in the path that he was going across. It reduced to below his knees. And he crossed Yamuna. And by Yogamaya's great power, Yashoda Mai was sleeping. And all the Brijabasis and Gokul were sleeping. So Vasudeva is, he's enjoying such an incredible pastime. Everyone's asleep, and it even seemed that Krishna on top of his head was sleeping. And then he came and put Krishna down and took this little girl, Yogamaya, Krishna's little sister, and brought back to Mathura. Then put little baby Yogamaya, a newborn infant girl, put her down. And she cried, just like any little baby cries. And suddenly everyone woke up and they went to tell Kamsa. Now Kamsa was very much afraid, because when Krishna decided to appear as Devaki Nandan, he went into the mind of Vasudeva. From the mind of Vasudeva, he was transferred to the mind of Devaki. And in this way, he appeared within her heart. And she became so effulgent. Never before, when Kamsa saw her, he knew for sure, I've already killed 6 of her children. The 7th one was a miscarriage, but I've never seen Devaki like this. She's illuminating all directions. Vishnu is definitely in her. But he was thinking, if I kill her now, then it won't look good for me. So let the child be born, and immediately I will kill this child. And he had all the guards on high alert. They were just monitoring every moment. And when little Yogamaya cried, immediately the word was sent to Kamsa. But Kamsa was not hardly sleeping at night. He was so afraid. Whether he was sitting, whether he was talking, whether he was eating, he was constantly remembering that Vishnu's going to come and kill me. In fact, Narada Muni told him that actually in your previous life you were Kalanemi and Vishnu killed you. And now you've come as Kamsa and Vishnu's going to come to kill you again. So he was really worried. So day and night he was absorbed in remembering Vishnu. But not in love, in hate. So when the word came that the child was born, he knew this is Vishnu. And he came down with all of his powers to kill that child immediately. And when he came, he saw it was a little girl. And Devaki picked up the little girl, was embracing to her heart with all of her motherly love, and she was crying piteously, "Please, my brother, I'm your sister. You've already killed 6 of my children brutally. Just give me the chance to have one child. It's a daughter. Vishnu's not a girl. You have no danger from a little girl." Kamsa, "Give me this child." And Devaki was pleading, embracing the child. Sanatana Goswami describes that not only did she love this child, but she knew it was Yasoda's child. And because of her great love and respect for Mother Yashoda, she wanted to protect Yashoda's child. She loved a child of Yashoda as much as she could love her own child. That was the type of friendship that they had. So she was begging, pleading, weeping incessantly for the life of this child. Kamsa, so merciless, forcibly ripped the child right out of her arms, picked up that child to smash her to death against a rock. Newborn baby child. Acharyas say the child was still kind of wet from the apparent fluids within the mother. And just when he was about to dash her against a stone, Kamsa, each one of his arms was as powerful as 10,000 male elephants. And these are Dwapar Yuga elephants. In comparison, the elephants of Kali Yuga are like puppy dogs. So such powerful arms. And here's this newborn baby that was just some hours old. And she looks like any little newborn baby that we have. And he was going to smash her against a rock. That's what he did to all the other children, right in front of Devaki and Vasudev's eyes. They were praying for this little girl. And the little girl slipped out of Kamsa's hands and floated into the sky and expanded into a gigantic form of Durga, sitting on a lion with 8 arms holding celestial weapons. She was illuminating the world, and Kamsa looked up at her and she chastised him. Kamsa, you are so cruel. Why are you doing so terrible misdeeds, torturing your own sister? Stop this. The child that is meant to kill you has already been born and is somewhere else. Now stop hurting your sister. Then she disappeared. And that was sobering to Kamsa. Suddenly, all these years of cruelty to Vasudeva and Devaki, all these years of cruelty, he put his own father Ugrasena in prison so that he could control everything. Suddenly, seeing Durga, he became a little sensible. What have I done? And then he fell at the feet of Devaki and begged forgiveness. He was trying to rationalize. He said, please forgive me for all I've done to hurt you and for killing all your children. And then he said, but actually, the body is just a temporary place for the soul, and the soul is eternal, and the soul goes through different types of body pleasures and pains according to their karma. So I was just an instrument of the karma of these children. And here our acharyas tell that demoniac people, people who are grossly materialistic, cruel people, they use knowledge of the Atma, the soul, for their own purpose, to justify their own cruelty. In fact, knowledge of the soul makes cruel people even more cruel, because they have a philosophical basis. Kamsa was preaching like this. It's not me, it's just their karma. And similarly, Hiranyakashipu, after Hiranyaksha died, being hit by the tusk and the hoof of Varahadev, he was explaining the nature of the soul in such incredible philosophical accuracy. But he used it all for the wrong purpose. So like anything in this world, knowledge, strength, beauty, wealth, science, if it's used in loving devotional service, bhakti, it has great benefits to everyone. But if due to our greed, our envy, our arrogance, those same gifts are causes of great danger. They infatuate one's ego even to make them even more cruel. That was Kamsa. So here he was begging forgiveness from Vasudeva and Devaki. And what did Vasudeva and Devaki do? They forgave him wholeheartedly. Okay, Kamsa, now you've woken up from your illusion. We forgive you. And Kamsa set them free for the first time in years. And then what happened? Kamsa went back to his room just thinking about what Durga Devi had spoke to him. And then he explained everything to his associates. Pralamba, Aga, Chanura. He said, this is what happened. And they said to him, no, don't do this. We must be worse than ever. Because if Vishnu is born somewhere else, why are you being so weak? We must kill him. And what's the way to kill Vishnu? Vishnu's hiding in the hearts of his devotees. It's hard to find him. And Shiva? Shiva's in the forest doing tapasya. And Brahma, he's meditating somewhere. And the demigods, you have already proven that you could defeat all of them. They tremble in fear of you. So we must kill Vishnu, who's the root of all the demigods. Then they will die. And how to kill Vishnu when he's hiding? By killing that which is dear to Vishnu. By killing the enlightened sages, the Brahmins. By killing the cows who provide ghee for their yagyas. Without them, Vishnu will die. And then you will be the ruler of everything. Let us do it. Give us permission. Give us your blessings and we'll go and destroy it all. Due to their association, Kamsa became more cruel than ever before and sent all of these asuras out to kill every child that had been born in recent times and destroy anything sacred, anything spiritual. He let loose a rampage of violence, cruelty. And meanwhile, while all this is going on, Nanda and Yashoda find little baby Krishna at Yashoda Mai's bedside. And he's so beautiful, he captures their hearts. They have a wonderful birth ceremony. And there it's described all the Brijabasis, how happy, because Nanda and Yashoda have such a wonderful child. In the spiritual state of consciousness, it's especially significant to recognize that there's no envy. Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, you can understand my message because you have no envy. And this is a repeated instruction given in the Vaishnava Vedic literatures. As long as there's envy, there's a barrier between us and appreciation of Krishna. So here Krishna is the child of Nanda and Yashoda, and everyone in the whole Braj Bhumi, Gokul, is happier than they could ever be happy because Nanda and Yashoda have a wonderful child. And because Nanda and Yashoda have a wonderful child, it's more dear to them than having a wonderful child themselves, because they're such well-wishers. This is the principle of Vaishnavism. We love to see others having Krishna. For the conditioned souls, we want to spread Krishna consciousness because our happiness is to see others happy with Krishna. And among devotees, our greatest joy is not that I have done this, but other devotees, Krishna's with them. Krishna's empowering them. Krishna's blessing them. We can understand our spiritual advancement according to how we deeply appreciate and find joy in seeing others receiving Krishna's mercy. That is the theme of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. So everyone in Vrindavan was at the summit of ecstasy because Yashoda and Nanda had given birth to such a beautiful, all-attractive child that everyone fell in love with. Little baby Krishna was just glancing upon the Brijabasis, and they were infused with his loving glance. They didn't know he was God, but they loved this little baby more than they could ever love God, because he was beyond God. Beyond God is, he was God who was giving himself so intimately, so personally, for the freest loving exchanges. That is Krishna. And they were dancing and they were playing instruments, and Nanda Maharaj was giving incredible charity. He was giving charity to the Brahmins, he was giving charity to the musicians, he was giving charity to every cowherd man, every gopi. He was giving charity to everyone. And Srimad Bhagavatam tells he was giving that charity with deep respect. Nanda Maharaj respected everyone. He wanted everyone to be happy. He wanted to share Krishna with all of them. And everyone just wanted to see Nanda and Yashoda most happy with Krishna. And Krishna most happy with them. And in this way, the first birthday ceremony of Krishna manifested in Gokul. And today we are, in our own little way, celebrating Krishna's appearance at Radha Gopinath Temple. So what is the greatest way we could show our love for Krishna? The way the Brijabasis, by just sharing Krishna with each other. Through kirtan, through Hari Katha, through appreciation of each other's services. Through truly being well-wishers. That's the Brijabasi spirit that we learn from this wonderful story. And I'm remembering in 1972 on the night of Janmashtami when Srila Prabhupada was at New Vrindavan, and it was the only Janmashtami I celebrated personally with Srila Prabhupada, physically. And he was sitting on his Vyasasana, and we all fasted the whole day, and it was really hot. And the temple room was very small. And there were hundreds of devotees crowded into it. And Prabhupada sat on his Vyasasana and told devotees to read Krishna book. And the sannyasis were reading. And they were so tired. And everyone was so tired, because now it's midnight. And I remember so many people were falling asleep. And so many people were trying to stop falling asleep by standing up. And those same people were falling down because they fell asleep. And I'm happy to tell you I was one of those people. Struggling to stay awake, struggling to stand up. And the devotees who were reading the Krishna book, they were not reading very enthusiastically because they were trying to, but they were really tired, and sannyasis' dandas were falling. Because it was so hot and so crowded. And Prabhupada was sitting in rapt attention, relishing every word. It was so beautiful. It's such a taste for hearing about Krishna. Transcendental sound. And when they came to the end of the first chapter, the advent of Krishna, thus ends the first chapter of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And everybody was so happy it ended. Everyone went, Jai! And Srila Prabhupada was sitting so intent. He said, next chapter. I read the next chapter. There's one chapter, the prayers of the demigods, which is mostly just prayers. And the demigods, in this context where you're starving, no water, no food, no air to breathe in that crowded temple room, it's midnight. You realize how philosophical the demigods are. These prayers seemed like endless analytic philosophy. kind of agonizing. And finally, and it's a long chapter, and it ended. Thus ends the prayers of the demigods to Krishna in the womb, and Jai. Prabhupada sitting there with his back erect, listening with such ecstatic emotion, he said, next chapter. And the people the cooks and the servers were outside with the pots to serve out the midnight feast, and now it's like 2 a.m. And even they felt they were sleeping next to the pots on the ground outside. And after the advent of Krishna, the birth of Krishna, then thus ends the next chapter of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at that time, everyone was just like, Jai. And it's a highlight of my life, because I was experiencing it. I was looking at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just looked at everyone and smiled, and he said, I think you are all tired. So we should end here. And at that moment, everyone went, Jai! Janmashtami is a wonderful festival. And these festivals, really, we should look forward to them throughout the whole year. It's a time where the whole devotee community comes together to encourage each other with Krishna in the center of our hearts and our lives. And the best way to celebrate Janmashtami is just the opposite of what Kamsa's friends and associates were telling him. They were telling Kamsa, we should terrorize and cause misery and death to the devotees, the Brahmins, because that will hurt Vishnu the most. Even if Vishnu was visible, if we tried to do something to him, it would not hurt him as much as if we hurt his devotees. So what is the opposite of that? The best way to give pleasure to Vishnu, the best way to celebrate Lord Krishna is to give happiness, to nourish the devotees. And what gives happiness most to the hearts of the devotees? When we share Krishna with each other. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. Shri Radha Gopinath ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Ananti Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai.
Maharaj